Hello, everyone. So we are now live on 9 Facebook pages and on Zoom. Can you hear me? Jean, Thomas, Nicole, can you hear me well?
I can. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody. So thank you very much for joining us today for the launch of the 2044 Coalition and this first European debate. My name is Pierre-Emmanuel and I lead the 2044 project for MoHo. The COVID-19 crisis will have a profound impact on our societies, economical, organizational, and political. There are a number of positive externalities to this crisis. Respect, of course, for the environment, improvement of the climatic situation, a return to local governments at a local level, the importance of solidarity, acceleration of education, digitalization. But it carries just as many risks: withdrawal, mass surveillance, violation of fundamental rights, delaying COP agreement application, and economic norms enforcement. The next day is to be invented to learn from this crisis and not repeat the mistakes of the past. But by whom and how? Let me quote now former US President Barack Obama in an interview last week in the magazine The Hill. So much of the progress we have made in our society is because of young people. Dr. King was a young man when he gets involved. Cesar Chavez was a young man. Malcolm X was a young man. The leaders of the feminist movement were young people. They are not the ones most often seen on television or on the front page of mainstream media. The young, and in particular those from disadvantaged backgrounds, feel completely excluded from opinion polls and have no voice in major decision-making. That is why we decided to launch the 2044 project, the first coalition of young Europeans who dare to lead the change. It is a global platform to help them taking the stage to express their visions of the next day, a more balanced, fairer, and more human tomorrow. I would like to thank our 40 partners across Europe, amongst them Erasmus, UNESCO, the Boston Consulting Group, the Institute of Open Diplomacy, the School Lab, the Young European Leadership, So Good, Make Sense, We Are One, Sense, Les Déterminés in France, My Life, My Say, and the Club of the European Member of Parliaments below 40 years old. We launched 2044 today for the anniversary of the D-Day, 1 year after the first MoHoDebate Summit in Normandy, where we gathered 100 international speakers from 12 nationalities to debate on the thematic Disrupt for Peace. And 1 year before the inauguration of the MoHo headquarters, a 7,500 square meter space dedicated to positive impact, a place for all change makers in the world who are willing to act. 2044 prepares for what comes after, a long-term vision aiming at the 100th anniversary of the D-Day, the last major event where young people mobilized to change the course of history and invent a new future for Europe. 2044 is also a pragmatic anticipation to 2050 Climate COP21. I am very happy to welcome humbly and seriously our guests today, Nicole from Germany, Jean from France, and our dear moderator, Thomas. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pierre-Emmanuel, for making this whole project possible. You've proven a strong leadership in developing the concept and in making it possible, getting things done. And I'm proud to facilitate the first panel of this coalition, which is meant to lead and pave the way towards a brighter and fairer future for young leaders and young citizens in Europe. Let me turn to my fellow panelists, Nicole and Jean, and introduce them before we start the conversation right now. So Nicole, we've been knowing each other for a long while because we've founded the Y20 Summit together 10 years ago almost. And you are since then became a social entrepreneur You've been developing the platform Filia to develop leadership by peer coaching, and that's a wonderful experience. You're also a global networker. You've co-founded the social entrepreneur network Impact, and you're a social scientist, I would say a published author on modern democracies and how modern governments should work today. Thank you for being with us this morning, Nicole, from Germany. And we also have Jean. Jean, you're a B Corp entrepreneur, meaning you're devoted to positive impact led by companies. You're yourself a tech for good entrepreneur. You're the CEO of the Phoenix firm, and therefore you are a zero waste pioneer, trying to make sure that our economy becomes more and more circular, which is obviously one of the more important issues that young people have in mind in Europe. So welcome to both of you, Nicole and Jean. I'm Thomas. I should present myself too. I am a think tanker. Actually, I founded and I'm now leading the Open Diplomacy Institute, which is a global affairs center for reflection that is devoted to civic participation at the global stage, including from youth. That's why I founded the Y20 Summit in 2011, and I chaired the Y7 Summit last year during the French presidency of the G7 in 2019. And I'm believing this should be done at the European scale, and that's why I guess I accepted so fast the invitation from Pierre-Emmanuel to become one of the ambassadors of the 2044 program. So I'll be facilitating the conversation today, and I have a simple question to you both, Nicole and Jean. What does 2044 mean to you? Why did you accept this program? Nicole, maybe you can start.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and welcome to everybody who joined us today. Yeah, why am I joining? I think it is very important to think long term. We're living in a world that seems very fast-paced, and the world also seems to have shrunk a lot, even in the past 10 years. You just mentioned how we were together in Paris, and we were debating about our future and what we envision for from youth perspective for the as a Y8, Y20 participant, and that was a fantastic experience. And I think only with these types of events or initiatives that force us maybe or allow us to look long term and to look into the future, and to combine that with actionable activities that we can ourselves implement, maybe together with other stakeholders as well. I think this is very timely and very important. We are, I think, also in a time where we're trying to find our place as youth. Sometimes it seems that leadership is in crisis, and we're wondering what is our role right now? What can we do? Where do we fit? As also, in a way, a marginalized group within Europe. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind.
Sure, thank you, Nicole, for this first answer. I'm turning to you, Jean. Of course, as a zero waste business leader, you're definitely committed to long term as well. But I'd like you to address more the why question on the point that Nicole just made. Why is there a such leadership crisis that needs now young people to get involved in the conversation?
I mean, we, for now, as you said, the young leaders we are seen or perceived as pioneers, but I think we have an incredible opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years to become the new standard, and to step out from this pioneering community to the dominant one. So it's our role to show that it can work, it's possible, and it's the right direction. And yeah, we need to become the new standard, and we need to become mainstream. Positive impact economy, sorry, and new models like tech for good and impact investing, impact entrepreneurship should be the new standard. They should be more generalized, and we count on the new generation to have this in mind when they create a company or they join a company, to be the change and to empower the change.
Thank you, Jean. This is our roadmap. This is our compass to get ahead. But before we get ahead, let's look a bit at what there is behind you. I'd like to know, since we're here to inspire a bit change and get more people involved, especially young people, I'd like you to explain a bit about your story. How did you get involved? What is the story behind such activism? I'm turning to Nicole first again. Tell me a bit more about your motivation, the mindset you've developed, and the skills that are needed to be there in this conversation right now.
Thank you for the question. So for me, my story started actually as a teenager, I would say, exploring my own sense of self. And the best way to do that is actually when you are not in your usual surroundings. So when I was a teenager, I went abroad, and I realized for the very first time, not being in my own country, what it actually meant to be a German, which I never thought about it when I was in Germany or grew up in Germany. It wasn't really something that was on my mind. Similarly, fast forward, when I started my first jobs, or applying for jobs, or even joining youth events, you start being surrounded by more male-dominated environments. Maybe you start realizing what it means to be a woman in certain environments, and step by step you start exploring layers of your identity, and you start understanding in the context that we live in what they mean. So what drives me is definitely the topic of power dynamics, and looking at especially looking at equal access to opportunity. That's also why I think entrepreneurship is a very interesting field, because it's very actionable. So I would agree with Jean in that regard. And I also believe it's very important to realize where the barriers lie. And I think as a young person, you do face a lot of barriers when you put yourself out there, whether it is traveling, whether it is studying, your first job. You have many firsts, basically, when you're a young person, right? You have your first hurdles, you have your first heartbreak, you have your first, So you're pushing against all of these boundaries as a young person, which gives you a unique opportunity to explore and question yourself, and by doing that also to see opportunities. So I would maybe just start out with that.
Thanks, Nicole. That's a strong point, pushing boundaries. That's exactly what we're meant to do in the 2044 Coalition. And Jean, you've been pushing a lot of barriers in your past lives. And the new life is starting now with this next generation EU plan. What are the most important barriers that you've been pushing that we need to take into account to get ahead?
Yeah, I can maybe share my story so that eventually inspires a couple of future leaders. So I started in a traditional path, because I studied in a business school called the ESSEC, and then at Sciences Po to have another view and another education. But I started in finance. So I worked during 5 years in an investment bank called Merrill Lynch, a US one, doing what we call merger and acquisitions, M&A. So it was a very, very traditional career path, at the very heart of traditional capitalism. And then after a cycle of 5 to 6 years, I decided to quit, because I had the feeling that I had a very limited impact on the world, and I wanted to contribute more positively on the planet, and I wanted to make something meaningful, of which I was proud of. So that's why I turned to impact entrepreneurship and social business, which was to my mind the good convergence and the good point between traditional business and efficiency, growth, but also to address a need of the society, and not just a market need, but to make the world a better place. So that's when I entered in the social business and the tech for good field. It was 6 years ago, back in 2014, when I was 30 years old. So I decided to switch. It was quite a radical switch in my career, but for the better, and I'm very happy to have made to have pushed the boundaries, like you said.
So I guess the two keywords here are switch and seek for impact. That's essentially what you both said. So I'm curious, many people listening to us today, including young people, young citizens, students, kids maybe, they have many reasons to drop, many reasons to quit the public space, many reasons to no longer believe. And I'm using this word believe because believe is exactly the title of last book of Michelle Obama, latest book of Michelle Obama. There will be many others. And obviously, we need to believe in something. So I'm curious, Nicole and Jean, to explore in what you believe. You've been drawing the lines already, but the beliefs you have and how it helps you in getting off of the obstacles that were in between you and your objectives. What are your beliefs and how did you get used to it to get rid of any obstacles? Maybe Jean, you could start.
Yeah. One of my strong beliefs is that it makes no longer sense to separate traditional economy and ecology, or traditional private sector capitalism and NGO and non-profit sector. I think those two, we should merge those two universes, and we could create in between a medium path, which is social business or tech for good or impact investing, impact entrepreneurship. That's what we try to prove on a day-to-day basis, that it's viable and it's a good solution to make the world a better place. So one of my beliefs is also that up to now we lacked success stories in this field. It was not seen as very credible. It was seen as maybe idealistic, but a few companies, and we are proud to be part of them, but we are not the only one. We have Back Market in France, which is refurbishing phones and laptops, which is a good company as well, and many others. But we are trying to show that it can scale, it can create jobs, it has growth, but at the same time it saves lives, it saves hundreds and tons of food and meals, and it fosters circular economy. So that was what was missing so far. It was role models and success stories to prove that it's viable.
And Jean, let me pick up the conversation from here. You've been speaking about I would say your human beliefs. What makes you from the very bottom, from the hurt. I'm curious a little bit about your contentions as a CEO of a firm. Management is also about developing and rolling out this positive economy. So can you tell us a bit more about the way you have also developed this vision in a professional field?
Yeah, I think we are in a very favorable environment to create positive impact companies and tech for good companies, because on the one hand you have a lot of talents who want to join forces and want to join those kind of companies. So obviously the new generation is seeking impact, so we receive a lot of resumes and we receive a lot of CVs every day. Second one, there is a lot of interest from big corporates and big groups to be inspired by new ways of making business and more CSR, more sustainable. So we're also trying to influence the traditional CAC 40 and so big companies. And so there is also a lot of financing and money. I spoke about responsible finance, green finance, impact investing. So a lot of people, a lot of funds want to make their money and have an impact with their funds. So I mean, the planets are being aligned progressively. Talents, clients, financing. That makes me quite positive on the long trend about positive impact and new models.
Thank you, Jean. I'm turning now to Nicole about the same question. Tell us a bit more about what are your strongest and deepest beliefs that make you so driving leadership, and especially in the professional field. How do you connect the dots between your, I would say, your social vision and the way to lead a firm as you do?
Yeah, great question. I think I agree to what has just been said. Everything is somehow already out there, right? Like, especially in Europe, we have great networks. There is resources available, right? There is innovation out there. Like we have, which are also from my research, published a book 2017 on startups that are impacting the world, and from that research that we did all over the world, actually not just in Europe but also outside of Europe, we realized that what matters for somebody to have an impact, anyone, is access to networks, resources, and knowledge. These are the three elements. If you only have one of them, it's actually quite difficult to have an impact, even if it's money. Because if you don't have the right network, if you don't have the right idea, then okay, you can have all the money in the world, but you're not going to have a great impact, right? Like, you need to really understand your surroundings, and you need to have great support. So now when we understand that this is what is needed, I think already you have a great roadmap, because you can look at yourself and you can see what you're lacking. A lot of times people feel very drawn to one of these three areas, and they feel comfortable there. You know, some people are great networkers and they just, you know, leverage that skill, but they kind of like forget about the other two, and so on. Like, you can go for any of these. So this is my belief, number one, when it comes to assessing what constitutes power, which is the basis of having an impact, which could be with a venture, right? What comes on top of that, though, is the aspect of your identity and how easy you can access these things. So there are numerous studies that, for instance, show that female entrepreneurs, first of all, there are not many female entrepreneurs, and they're not as supported either. Yeah. So I think my belief is that access to opportunity needs to be there for different genders, but it also needs to be there for people from different nationalities, even within Europe, even outside of Europe. People can have a great idea from that are coming from a very different context than the regular finance world, let's say. So our challenge of the day and age is, I think, is to lower the barriers for people that are not just young, but even to question, what does youth mean, right? Like, who belongs to that youth? And to have in mind that there might be somebody even outside of Europe that has a fantastic idea that can benefit Europe as well, to think outside of the box. Impact, the global network that we started a few years back, started in Afghanistan. And we are including, you know, entrepreneurs from conflict and post-conflict environments, but we're also in New York and Paris because we are connected. And I think it is so important to recognize that and to lower the barriers. And another important aspect is also the bureaucracy around a lot of these opportunities, right, that some people just cannot overcome. So I think the way we go about including more people into this positive field of social entrepreneurship is by really paying a very close attention to inclusivity.
Thank you, Nicole. That's a wonderful answer from you, both of you. I guess it's really insightful, and it certainly will inspire a bit our fellows listening to you both. Pierre-Emmanuel is about to show a drawing that was sent across by one of our listener, Patty Yoka. She's a World Peace Ambassador from the UK. And it's a drawing from the Calvin and Hobbes bande dessinée. I don't know how to say that in English anyway. From the comic Calvin and Hobbes, and it asks a very interesting question. I wonder if you can refuse to inherit the world. That is, if you see the question of a kid that is now facing the rudeness and the hardness of a world he is entering in, and the tiger answer, I think you were born. It's too late. Meaning you are in the world. You cannot refuse the way it is, but you need to change it. So that's why I like to ask you this question. Thank you, by the way, Thady Yuka, for sending us this picture and sending questions about that. Why is it so much important to have youth involved in a process? We are here to get young people involved all across Europe, but behind that there is a question: why is it so determinative to address this question to youth, while kids could ask the question that Calvin is raising? So maybe, Nicole, you could start there.
So why is it so important to raise the question of why youth should get involved? Yeah. I mean, we can just look at what is happening right now. We know that we will be inheriting a system that might not be as agile as we need it to be, right? Like, I think this is kind of like known. But if we look at what is going on, for instance, right now, there is protests, a lot of people talking about discrimination, for instance. And I just want to highlight that I think yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Berlin passed the first German state anti-discrimination law, which explicitly bars public authorities, including police, from discriminating based on skin color, gender, or other factors. So that's basically one of the new rules to help to address systemic racism in Germany. And I believe, I mean, looking at what is going on in the world right now, and then seeing that there's a response, that there is a law being put in place, such as that one in Berlin, gives us hope. And it shows us that we do have an impact, and that our voices matter, and that our wish to live in a more equal world and to live in a more participatory world matters, because there are people also listening, and if they're not listening, we need to ask them to listen more, which I think is something we can see all over the world right now. So I just wanted to draw up that example, because in the end of the day, it is always these two sides. It's a systemic evolution that we need to see towards equality, towards equal access to opportunity for social entrepreneurship, for instance, and so on. But it does start with yourself, right? Like, so there is this other side as well. So, you know, yeah, we can say, oh, the law is so much out there, it's so far away from us, but yeah, as one person maybe, but if we all start like also looking at ourselves, this is why also Philia is so very important. Philia is an initiative that is supporting peer-to-peer support between women, because we do need to start, you know, with our own confidence, with our own ideas, and to be able to share that, so that we have an effect like the one that I just shared, because I think that's a good result.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm turning to you now, Jean. Nicole has pinpointed I guess the most important word in our conversation: hope. That's essentially what Barack Obama was trying to lead when he was running for president, and that's the very brand he has signed off the campaign with. But I guess this is exactly what we need today. It's hope. So I'm turning to you again. Why is it so important to have youth involved? Is it only about hope, or is there anything else?
I would hope, obviously, it's a good, it's a very important word, but also I also add trust, and trust in yourself, and don't have any complex. Or when I was your age, I wouldn't have thought that a couple of years later we would have created a company with 200 employees and saving more than 17 million meals. So. But it's just a matter of trust and of confidence, and you can have an impact. You can be the change. the leaders are people like you and me. We are not superheroes. It's just focus and work and energy. So anyone can be an entrepreneur. Anyone can be a change maker. But my second message is entrepreneurship or creation is not the only path. You can have also a huge impact by influencing big companies and being an employee in a big company by changing a contract, by changing a production line, by switching to another supplier. You can also have a big impact at scale in a big company. So entrepreneurship is not the only way. You can also have a big impact in big corporates, and the real change would probably come from them once we succeeded in changing the minds of the big decision makers of the largest company.
Thank you, Jean, for bringing back the big corporates in the game. That's obviously one thing important in the conversation. That relates to the question of how do we pave the way for change. We've been speaking about hope. We have been speaking about future generations. Obviously, from the why question comes down the question of the how question. And obviously, there is something bold to be made to get the generation Y involved in a process. We always hear back in the ground that it's difficult to commit people from the generation Y or generation Z, even more difficult. I'm not sure this is the case, and we've seen it all across Europe and the world actually, while Fridays for Future have risen their voice to draw the attention of global leaders on climate crisis. We have one of the other 2044 ambassador, Carla Redsma, who is one of the leader of Fridays for Future in Germany. We'll have an opportunity to listen to her, but it's exactly why I believe there is no such a mess with young people commitment. And there I'm asking the question, how do you think yourself that we can get more people involved by 2044 in general? Is it about care? Is it about inclusion? Is it about accountability? Is it about Europe? That's the question I would like to ask you, and starting with Nicole, how to get people involved?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, how to get people involved. I think I agree with the fact that people rather want to be involved. So also with Impact, you know, we have a lot of people that want to join or that want to participate in some way, similar to Philia. So I think the question isn't that people don't want to be involved. Especially now, COVID, you know, where we do what we used to do and meet as we used to meet. I think even more there's an urge to connect and to do things together, to co-create and to bring a change together. And I think there is a driver in us where we want to know each other as well. So I believe that this is not the issue. What we need to allow, I think, much more is for making mistakes. And making mistakes together and failing together and failing openly and seeing that as part of a larger process. Because I mean, look at us at 2011 when we had the Paris Y8, Y20. We were all 10 years ago. We were all assuming a responsibility there, and we were making mistakes as well, you know. And we were trying out a power position with each other, and we were trying to negotiate with each other, and that is an experience that prepares you for later, because you see, oh, that didn't work, or oh, this worked really well. And I think having the means to fail is something that we need for people to take ownership. I really believe that it's hard to take ownership if you don't own anything. You know, ownership means you own something. So you have to have something to take ownership. And I think it does take ownership to, you know, hold a company together, to get involved politically, to get involved in a big corporate. You have to be able to take ownership over something and to assume responsibility. And this we need to practice early on. And I think this is very important, and it has to include failure. And I'm sure that many entrepreneurs know how many times you have to fail, how many times you have to stop until, because you cannot go until it's perfect. There is no time for that. There is, you just have to continue going and pivot. And this is just, we have to be, especially in Europe. I mean, I'm German. Germans are a lot of times also very risk averse. Which also has its positive sides to it, obviously, but it is important to inject this opportunity for failure. And how else? I think another problem we have, and a belief that we have, is that we all need to be leaders. And I think this is something we need to rethink as well. That also comes from my work with Philia. I think we need to be two things. We need to be leader and we need to be follower. We need to be two things at the same time, not at the same time, but in an exchange, in a rhythm, Now I lead, then I lean back and you lead me, and we need to lead each other at different points in time. And this is something we have to learn. And this is something we have to practice. And I think new ways of participation are important for that. New ways of how we structure our companies are important there. And to have that rotation going is very important, because power, if you look at it, it's like water. If it stands still, it starts smelling, and that is not good. So we have to keep things moving around, because that's more healthy. That's some of my
That's great, Nicole. Thank you for this really strong plea for collective leadership and dance, actually being both the leader and the follower. It's how you dance. So it could be pleasant to know and reflect on how to get more people involved, and especially young people. So I'm turning back to Jean to have your insights about that. How do you see the way to get people involved? The same question as I asked to Nicole.
I agree with what Nicole said about leadership and collective leadership. And I also think we need role models, and I also think we need more diversity in role models. We need to see new faces, and including people, more disadvantaged populations, or people from suburbs. If you look at this morning, this conference, we are 4 speakers, for white people between 30 and 40. So we need to see new faces emerging, and we need to see minorities. So that would be also a good thing, a good point. And obviously there is a role of governments and public institutions to promote those initiatives, to fund those initiatives, and also to work with those initiatives. Because in France, for example, with Phoenix, we received a lot of support from the government, especially funding, subsidies. But I would have loved to have the state as a client, and to have the state as being exemplar, have an exemplarity leadership, working with social entrepreneurs and social enterprises for their tender offers. So that's it. I mean, more diversity, more support from the governments and the public affairs, and we'll make it, because the consumers also want the change. They want new ways of doing business, new brands, committed with strong beliefs. So the big corporates won't have the choice if they don't want to lose their clients.
All right, guys, we have many questions stemming from our participants. Obviously, on the question we've just raised, how to get more young people involved, there was a question asked by Florian. She's from Spain, and she wanted to know whether the idea of a youth European Parliament for people from 18 to 35 would be a good idea, to have a box, I'd say, to listen to young people at the European scale. Jean and Nicole, how do you see this idea of a youth European Parliament?
I think it's a great idea. In France, we have something quite similar, and we also have something called the Le Parlement des Entrepreneurs d'Avenir. So I think it could be a good tool to empower the change and to foster our reflections. So yeah, I'm in favor of this. I think it's cool.
Okay, and Nicole, how do you see the idea?
I think also it's a good idea, but we would have to look at, I guess, what kind of authority that Parliament would have, right? Like, so again, like we have a lot of fora for people to participate, and if we add more, I think that's great. But at the end of the day, it's not just the participation, but it's to have some sort of to be able to evoke change or to implement laws or something, right? Like, so we have to be very clear on that, and then yeah, I mean.
But maybe instead of having the young people in a focused parliament, maybe we should have more young people in the traditional in the real parliament. Right. Instead of parking them in a thing for them, we should have more of them in the real one.
Sure, guys, I'm taking the advantage of this question to also share some ideas. As I've told you, I've been involved in designing youth participatory mechanism at a global stage for years now. And last year, when we hosted the Y7 summit under the patronage of President Emmanuel Macron, who was chairing the G7 summit, we've been addressing this question on how to make sure that the interests of future generation was taken into account in policy designing. And we had lots of conversation around that. And the one key structural change we have envisioned that could be a good idea to take away from this conversation was to change the constitutions of every nation state and state in the constitution, the parliament should vote legislations which take into account the interest of future generations, which would ensure that whatever the age of MPs is, they have the voice of youth back in the mind of their mind, and that's obviously what the constitutional judge would be controlling in. So that's another idea, and obviously the question that Florian from Spain has risen was also meant to develop this idea at the European scale. So I'm turning now to a question that was asked by one of our South African participants, Minhard Kruger. She or he, I don't know what if it's a male or female first name, sorry for that, but Minhard is a history teacher, and she or he was asking, how did social network in the 21st century make a change in developing global leadership? That's why I'm connecting it to the earlier question about European. We are now launching the 2044 coalition, which is meant to address these questions at the continental stage. And I'm asking you, Nicole and Jean, you are both active users of social medias. How do you use it to lead to lead the change, and how do you use it in your professional capacity? Maybe Jean, you could start.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful tool to spread messages. So how I use it, I have a team at Phoenix which is doing the communication, and which is as a lead on all our social networks, and they put me to create also a personal, what we call personal branding, because it's important to also have the Phoenix brand, but the CEO on a side, which is with his personal messages and his state of mind. So yeah, they are trying to push me on.
Did you expose to pushback from your community using social networks? Have you been bullied by trolls, or did you have some backlash from the people you address to using?
Maybe not that much. Maybe a bit on Twitter, which is well known for gathering a lot of haters, but it wasn't too. No, it's usually well received and well perceived, and it's okay. But yeah, the networks I use most are LinkedIn and Twitter, and I think they are powerful tools. I'm less used to Instagram and Facebook, but it's also powerful.
Right. Yeah. Guys, so I'm asking the participants to also get involved in spreading the word about 2044 coalition. We need you as ambassadors on social networks to spread the word. And on top of Nicole and Jean, we will definitely appreciate your sustained help in that. But I'm turning back to Nicole about this question on social networks. Women leaders especially are very, very much vulnerable on social networks because of sexual harassment via social networks. Have you been exposed to that on your role as a role model on social networks?
That's a great question, because the question is, where does harassment start and where does it end? And what are women allowed to do, and how should women behave? So from that point of view, I would say I personally also get informed of what is allowed to be done, or how one should behave, which depending on what we normalize as how much we normalize harassment, we could see that as a norm, nothing basically. So it's always again the question of awareness of how do you treat a woman being on social media, and how do you treat a man being on social media. So definitely, I think most women are experiencing that, even though we've, again, as I said, like, it's so normalized that a lot of times you don't even understand it. But coming to social media, I think it's one of the most powerful tools that we have at our hand. And I think to guard that power of access to that is vital, because what we are doing now and the way we are connecting to each other wasn't possible 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? Like that is something completely new. And I also want to highlight as much power as it has. Power in and of itself is never positive or negative, right? It can be both. And I think we have to be very alert of both of the sides. When it comes to social media, I see it as two sides in terms of analyzing trends, because you can look and you can watch and you can listen. And it's about trust, because people can develop a trust in your brand or in your persona or whatever you're putting out there. But right now the question is what information is real and what isn't. And I think and who's spreading what and who's in charge of what, and these questions keep coming up. Data protection keeps coming up, and it's so important to keep that place. Harassment is one thing, a very important thing that pushes women out and pushes other marginalized groups out. Yes, and you have to somehow be an ally, if you can. But on the other hand, the other question is, what do we see there, and is it real? Deep fakes, AI, right? Like this is reality that we cannot even comprehend. So I think this is very, very important. I also want to highlight that we might need new forms of social media that are more inclusive, more safe space. Actually, with Filia, we're also developing an app for the peer-to-peer program, where people can have a safer space to exchange about what they actually go through on a weekly basis, how they feel, and what they long for, which you cannot on the current platforms do. The current platforms are very much geared towards quick information, fast information, crazy information, like attention-seeking information. And the question is, what kind of world do we want to live in? And I think we really need to ask ourselves these questions and reflect on ourselves and our own usage as well. So I just wanted to highlight that this is not an easy question, but it's a super important question.
Thank you. I'm sorry to ask one last super important but not easy question, and I'm even more demanding in asking you to answer by one word or one simple sentence to this question. We had a question from Edouard Vernet. He's asking essentially, Europe is now in the middle of crisis. We've been going through the COVID-19 health crisis. Brexit was a profound wound in our European project 4 years ago. In one word, how do we get European bolder to lead the change? And maybe Jean is starting.
In one word, it's complicated, but I very much rely on the Germano-French collaboration. So Angela and Emmanuel, we are watching you.
So we watch Paris and Berlin. Nicole, what's your insight?
I would say humility. I think we need to start with that. I think we live in a world that is bigger, faster, louder, and everybody just is talking a lot. And that's great. But if we don't listen as well, we can never advance, and we can never be really wise as well if it comes to leadership. So I would say we need to slow down, and we need to start listening, because when we listen to everybody talking, because the talking is already happening, that's when the transformation can take place inside of us, and out of that we can then start again and implement, and we can have a core that can support us. So this is my word.
I'm about to pass back the torch to Pierre-Emmanuel so that he can present in details the 2044 coalition, but maybe a small conclusion before we get there. Thank you both for designing and drawing such a good portrait of what a young leader should be in leading the change towards 2044. I guess I took note of 4 main ideas. First, it's about explore. It's how to explore yourself. Nicole, you've been very talkative about the way we need to explore our inner self to understand our values, and I believe this is the first step to lead the change. Then the second step is about switching, and that's the point of Jean, from tradition, from where we stand, to a more modern approach, to a more contemporary approach. And I guess this is where we become a young leader, or when we become an ambassador to 2044. Then it's about trust. It's about leadership itself. It's about taking self-confidence. It's about authorizing others to make mistakes and to bring you insights. And it's about trusting your own purpose, your own ideas, your own beliefs as for the society in itself, and as for the way you cooperate with other individuals. Explore, switch, and then trust. And the last is obviously drive to connect people, drive to create new projects, and drive to co-develop yourself with others. It's about collaboration, it's about creativity, it's about connection, and obviously it connects with the last dot that Nicole was pointing. It's about humility. So I'm using this last word to humbly pass the torch back to Pierre-Emmanuel to thank you all for your questions. I was proud to facilitate this panel, which is obviously ushering us into a very interesting project, 2044.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you, Nicole and Jean. It was not an easy topic, so thank you very much for these thoughts and this global summary at the end, Thomas. Everybody, just let me give you for 1 minute quickly some information about the next steps for our coalition. Well, it's organized in 4 phases. First, listen to the young, so to what they have to say. Then we have a project briefs phase to think about concrete solutions. Then we will launch a global call to young people who want to go engage and to deliver this project with mentoring and financing. And finally, and maybe it's the best part, we will gather on the 6th of June 2021, so in just 1 year from now, in Normandy, of course, to celebrate and plan for what's next. Right after this debate, we will launch a global survey through Europe to map the main problems the youth wants to tackle in priority. I've just put the link in the chat, so please feel free to use it and to share it. Please have a say, take this survey, share it to 3 friends minimum. We really want it to be representative, to be inclusive, to be pan-European, and not just one more survey on the world of tomorrow. So please use it and share and spread the word. Good afternoon. Thank you one more time, Nicole, Jean, and Thomas. Take care of you and your beloved, and see you very soon to have one more chat on the 2044 platform. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.